Welcome back to the Creating Distance podcast hosted by TA Sales. I'm your host, Tom Alamo. Some people call me Tommy Tahoe. And each week on Fridays, we'll be bringing you an episode to break down with salespeople and sales leaders the top tips, tactics, strategies, stories that you need to get to the next level of your career and up-level yourself. So let's get into it. All right, Keith, welcome to the Creating Distance podcast. Happy Friday. Happy end of month. How are we doing?
Doing great. Thanks for having me, Tom.
Yeah, excited to have you on. A lot of listeners to this show know that I love to start in the early stages of people's careers, and you've had just a fantastic run. Like if anyone that's listening goes to your LinkedIn and just sees all of the success, all of the great brands that you've worked for and helped to build, it's really inspiring just to see for someone that's earlier in their career. And so I'd love to take it way back. At least for my internet stalking, it looks like it started at Charles Schwab for you. But I'd love to learn. I don't know if you were the kid selling lemonade, at 10 years old or anything like that. But how did you get into sales? How did that come across your mind, and what was kind of your gateway into it?
Yeah, so Charles Schwab was my first job out of college and wasn't sales related at all. I was trying to get into finance and didn't
Yeah,
really know. Both my parents were doctors. And so I had no guidance on what to do to get into business, but I knew that I loved economics. I loved like studying economics. That's what I majored in, and trying to understand both the micro of like supply and demand and then the macro, how the economy works, had me know that I wanted to go in the business direction. And I was really lucky at the time to get to Charles Schwab, like right in the tail end of the dot-com craze. And so a lot of people were doing online trading for the first time, and this is before Robinhood. So the only games in town were E-Trade and Charles Schwab. And Charles Schwab had pioneered online trading, and went there. I started in finance, loved the numbers, but really craved some customer focus. So eventually moved into marketing there and marketed some of our high-end offerings for the brokerage, which was really interesting. Again, no sales. My sales journey starts way later in my career, which we can talk about. But that was my first role, and eventually took me back to business school so I could learn more about like the fundamentals of business that I had just kind of skipped ahead and leaned into. Economics, great major, and I learned a lot, and I use it every day in many different ways, but didn't prepare me for all the nuances of how companies operate.
yeah. Okay, so walk me through the first sales role, or what you would consider, more of a customer-facing sales role.
Yeah, so the first role that's close to that was my job at YouTube, and I like on
Yeah,
paper the most amazing job ever. I was running the scaled partnership team for YouTube, and when you think about YouTube, this is before like Netflix was around, but this is pre-YouTube TV. This is when creators were just
yeah,
putting out their content and monetizing, and there was no video, there was no TikTok, there was like no one was posting videos
yeah.
on Twitter either. So this was the only game in town, and it was before people got really big, but they could still make like 10 figures on YouTube. And my team's job was to go find the highest performing talent that was doing really well and get them to monetize and work with them. We weren't actually selling anything because you just gave up a portion of your ad earnings to Google, and in return, you got a lot of ad earnings and you got promotion. And so that's what we did. And it was a really interesting job at a time when YouTube was trying to go up market and bring in studio content to continue working with the creators. And what I thought was super intriguing about it was that, when you think about company strategy, you think about doubling down on your strengths. And for
Hmm.
me, the strength of YouTube was this like vast network of creators that you had millions of people putting up their content, and any one of them could be the next star, right? And now all these household names on YouTube. But at the time, there were very, very few of those people. And my team was helping discover them and monetize them and teach them tactics to grow their audience.
Wow, interesting. So was that an easy sale or a hard sale to get them to, because were they, before they were doing, like part of the ads through YouTube, I'm sure that brands would reach out and they might have some sort of like partnership with Nike or some consumer brand like that, or was it they weren't even doing that at that
They
stage?
weren't
Like the
doing
Mr.
that.
Beasts of the world, or
Yeah, no, this is old. Like I'm old. So
yeah,
this is like a decade ago, and eventually we moved in that direction. But most of the
okay,
partnerships were for like the top 100 people. But we told them how to get those partnerships. We started making connections and we built out that motion at YouTube.
yeah, okay. Yeah, that was the heyday. That must have been an interesting job to be able to work with them and just be able to see like the growth that YouTube has had. Even since then, I think it's like I think it's the second largest search engine in the world, right? Just behind Google search. So just to be able to see that from that lens, and it's almost like you're an agent of some sort, like working, like trying to get help deals with some of these like creative types, which is uh, when a lot of people come on the show and talk about their first sales role, it's not something like that. It's generally, uh, maybe they were selling something door to door, or they were just a BDR, making 200 calls a day. So you had more of a high level type of person and persona that you're working with in the first
Totally.
time.
And I wasn't, I mean, I got on a few calls, but I was running the team, which I think
Yeah.
is a testament to what Google did really well, which was well, I mean, I hope they hired smart people. I consider myself decently
Yeah.
smart, but they hired people who were hungry and smart, and they put them in positions where they could grow into the role and step up. And I do try to follow that philosophy as well. Hunger and a willingness to learn are two of the traits I still hire for, and I think that's really important. But like, I think it sort of leads to maybe something that is different from probably a lot of people on your podcast, which is like, I didn't grow up carrying a bag. I'm not your classic seller. I grew up from a data perspective and thinking about these things as
Mm.
operations. And at the end of the day, every sale is in some ways an operation that you can start with, whether it's an inbound lead or an outbound call. You get a connection with the customer, you've got to nurture that connection. Like, it's a process. And I tend to
Mm.
approach it like that process, and break down all these steps. And to me, optimizing each step helps us get better. And I know we've worked together and you've helped us with certain steps along that journey. But I do think instead of treating the sale as the sale, when you can deconstruct the sale, discovery, demo, close, negotiation, and optimize each of those steps, it helps you get better. That's at least my approach, which I think is really different than a lot of people who just grew up carrying a bag.
Yeah, that's interesting. And do you feel like that thought process is innate to you, or was just the lens that you've seen things through your other roles? Do you think going deeper into business school, was another point that I wanted to get to? Do you think that all shapes it? Because I do find that interesting versus the more traditional path of someone that just goes from SDR to AE to manager to VP of sales to CRO, and we've had plenty of those stories, and I think your path is a little bit more unique than that.
I think it's because my background was in operations. Like, I don't know another way to do it. I'm not I don't know if you think about like different kinds of sellers. Like, I'm not the most charismatic natural seller. I can't just like get on a call and innately pull out what's unique about that customer and what they want. So I have to be structured to be successful in it. And we'll get to it, but I didn't really go into like a hard sales um, focused role until I was at Adobe, which is like much later in my career. And I did that because I got advice from a mentor, which is, if you want to help shape a company in the best way possible, you have to own the revenue. And you do that by, you're either in a self-serve business where you're like the GM, or you're in sales and you're a sales leader. And so for me, the only thing I knew was, hey, I can take this operational backing that I've done and break down these problems and bring it to, individual sales and getting good at those for the large sales. But of course, the whole sales operation that we have.
Hmm. Did you ever get pushback, or was that ever challenging for you to come in and leading sales organizations without like with having this different lens, was that ever a challenging thing to adjust to, or did people always kind of accept that you're coming into this from like a little bit of a different angle than them, and they appreciate the operational mind that you have that a traditional seller might not?
I'll answer that in two ways. The first is when I decided that I wanted to like run a sales org. It was
Yeah,
hard. Like not a lot of people wanted to interview me because of that. Like it's really easy to say, hey, the tried and true thing is to go hire someone who's come up through sales and they ran a team of 5, then they ran a team of 20, then they ran a team of 40, and I'm leaping into a job where I'm going to be running a team of 80 sellers. So it's hard, but I guess that's where I actually did sell because I sold myself and what I could do,
yeah,
and Adobe took a chance on me, and then after that it was a little easier. But I certainly hadn't run anything like PandaDoc, and again, the founders here took a chance on me. So that's one thing, like that was hard, and then the second was especially at PandaDoc, I think some of the sellers were probably skeptical at first, like this guy doesn't have a sales background, but you usually don't tell your boss that. So I didn't get a lot of it face to face.
yeah,
I could feel some of it. I'm very self-deprecating, so I did say to a lot of them, and I still say, like, I'm not a very good seller. And a lot of them who've been on sales calls with me will say, "No, you're pretty good," and I'm like, "No, I'm really not." But I do approach the sale in like a little different way as well, which is just being really honest and again trying to break things down. So yeah, a little bit, but I think over time you overcome that.
yeah, yeah. I think in some ways, a traditional buyer might appreciate your tone and the way you go about a sale because it probably does feel very non-salesy, and that you're just, more black and white of like, here's where we are. This is the process. What's blocking us from getting to from point A to point B? Like why are we not moving forward, or what's the issue here? And I feel like you might have just a natural tendency maybe to be more blunt and more analytical in how you think about something versus oftentimes a seller can get happy ears, they can get emotional about the sale and not quite see it in the same lens as you. So, from a traditional seller, it might be interesting to have you involved in some deals and at the executive level because you can see things just through a different light.
I'm gonna have to ask some of my account execs what they think about that. But it's
Yeah,
possible. I do, I'm also like, and I think some classic sellers are good at this too. But if it's not a fit, it's not a fit. Part of my job is running
yeah,
all revenue, so I don't want a sale that's going to churn out in 6 months or a year.
yeah,
So, and I've tried to push this with my team, but I'm really big on understanding pain. I mean, most sales methodologies have some level of pain understanding in there. And if you're not solving pain, it's probably not going to be a really good fit. But when I'm, having a conversation with a customer or prospect, it really is trying to understand the pain and whether I'm able to solve that pain. And then I'm just talking about what my company can do for them. Like it's not, I don't think of it as a sale. I think about it as a conversation. Like I want to help you and you have this problem that we've identified. You've identified, you told me about it, and my company fits that perfectly. So let me be the spokesperson for why we're the best fit for you to have that.
yeah, yeah. No, I think that's the right way to go about it. I think trying to make it conversational, I think that builds trust. I'm a big fan of The Transparency Sale, which is a great book written by Todd Capone, that the listeners can check out if they don't know it. So I do think everyone should have their own style, and kind of play into their strengths that way. I'm curious to learn, again, going back to your career trajectory, and we, listed some of the great brands that, you worked for and helped to build, talked about the transition over to Adobe. Um, Most of your career for, the first decade or two were really focused on these, ultra large brands. Um, and now you're running, president of PandaDoc, 100+ million ARR. I know you just told that story at SaaStock last week of that journey. So that's a huge difference. And I'm curious, like, what was going through your mind? What was the inspiration to, you know, go really in a completely different direction and really go, further down the market to solve a new type of challenge?
Yeah, it's funny because I would never trade my experience at Google for anything. I was there 10
Yeah.
years, and when I started, the company was 16,000 people. So it was pretty big. Felt a lot smaller than 16,000. Like you back
Yeah.
then, it felt like you knew everybody in Mountain View. But it was a big company, and over the years, as great as the company was, it changed a lot. And it became a lot harder to get things done. And I felt like I was having trouble driving the change that I wanted. And so when I decided to leave Google, I started looking mostly at smaller companies, to be honest.
Mm.
And I remember exactly the interviews of the small companies I was talking to, and I knew I wanted to go in that direction because I wanted to be able to drive change. Like for me, driving change, having an impact, and being able to see that impact is important. And I feel like at a big company, it can become pretty hard to see the impact. So I looked for a long time, and ultimately, like I went to an even bigger company, J&J, which is funny,
Yeah.
but it kind of goes back to a core philosophy I have, which I treat in my career, and it's probably the first piece of advice that I will give to anyone asking me, which is you create options for yourself. And this goes back to my time in business school. Um, Options have intrinsic value, and we think about options on like the stock market, like calls and puts, and you pay
Mhm.
money to get the ability to buy a stock later or to sell a stock later. Um, it has value. It's the same thing in life, which is if you're opening doors for yourself, even if you don't know where those doors go, it has value. I was approached with this like amazing opportunity to go to J&J and get, take on some significant responsibility, work for a great leader. It's obviously a well-respected company. I wasn't particularly focused on going into healthcare, but we had a mission to try to change J&J to be very technology focused and work with some great people who would all
Mm.
be based out in Silicon Valley, coming from classic tech companies. And that had so much value in that option, like to get a step up in my career, to build a team from scratch, to work with some really great people. And so I took that option, and that led me down a really different path, which ultimately I could not have gotten my job at Adobe without that. And without my job at Adobe, I would not be a PandaDoc. So like I created this option by taking something that I wasn't sure would be right, knowing that I would get all those things as part of the package and that those would have value for me later.
Mhm. Are there any other examples you have? I really appreciate that idea of trying to create options for yourself, and not get yourself too pigeonholed into one scenario. Just curious if there's any other examples you have from either your career, or if you give that advice to people, any situations that stand out where people are at a crossroads, and it's a common type of conversation you have where you're giving that type of advice.
I mean, business school was one of them, to be honest, because
Mhm.
it's like a reset in some sense. Like if you ask a lot of people, I'm not this way. I like loved Wharton. I learned so much. Like I said, I came from an economics background. I learned all this like these business things that were interesting. But going there gave me several options. One, it created a network of business people that I didn't have and I still tap into. And ultimately, I probably wouldn't have gotten my job at Google without one of my best friends from business school telling me to get out of investment banking and to come work with him at Google. So that had like an option to it. It also had an option that, a lot of companies, including the bank that I worked for, would never have looked at me coming from Charles Schwab. But because I went to get an MBA, they're essentially like, you're getting a reset. Um, so that, and then I think like there's a stamp on the resume that is not for every company. I think a lot of tech companies in particular don't care, nor should they. But a lot of companies will only look at you if you have that or look at you for a management position. And so that just
Mhm.
creates options. Like maybe I would never use it. Probably doesn't matter now in my career. Nobody really cares. But at the time, I think it opened doors for me. And that's what I'm always trying to do. I'm trying to open more doors, not close them.
Yeah. Well, I still think it is still a stamp on your resume that will last forever. As someone that is uh, quite the opposite of you in some ways, in that, like, came up the sales tree, studied entrepreneurship in college, did not go to get my MBA. and now running a business, and that, I hope could be, a fraction as successful as PandaDoc someday. Personally, what do you think, like lesson wise or topic wise, were some of the best things that stood out to you about that additional schooling that truly, you mentioned economics earlier, but from your undergraduate, but anything else, any other topics that stand out as being particularly helpful for what you're doing today, or some of the steps that led you here? Or maybe another way of asking is, like, if you were me and you were going out and going into the school of hard knocks and going to go read books or watch YouTubes or whatever, like any lessons for me on that, or advice for me on that?
I think there's two. One is it's probably easier now in today's day and age, which is pattern matching. Like one of the things we just did is we studied a lot of examples, in whatever
Mhm.
finance, accounting, strategy, marketing. And you just look at examples and then you pattern match over time. You find what examples have analogs to what you're doing or to what your competitors are doing, and you try to figure things out. And like nothing's going to be a perfect fit, but like, can I see what happened in this scenario that's similar to my current scenario and use that?
Mhm.
And we talked about it. We would just talk about it. So like, a lot of this happens now either on podcasts, which is great, or at like the dinner table. Last night I had dinner with some coworkers, and we were just talking about some like acquisitions that were made and some what LLMs are doing to company strategy. And you're having this conversation, you're trying to pattern match. And so I think that's one that I would do. And I think you can do it by just watching podcasts about business, or, you know, reading case studies, or reading business articles, or even earnings
Mhm.
reports from analysts will tell you and like what they think is going to happen. The second is so cliche, but feels really forgotten in today's day and age. I mean, I can tell you in 3 years at Adobe and 2.5 at PandaDoc, we've never brought these up, but I think about them all the time. It's the 4 Ps and the 5 Cs of marketing. And I think every once in a while it's helpful to just go back and refresh like what they are, how they apply to your business. Because odds are you may not be thinking about these like very key levers that
Mhm.
are really a framework. I mean, they're not going to tell you what to do, but they tell you how to think, which is, you probably can see, I'm very big on like, how do I use a framework to think about something? And they help
Mhm.
me break a problem down from this monolithic thing, which is like, how do I market my product or service, to let me think about the price, the place, the product itself. What's the context for my customer? Who is my customer? Usually we think about that, but breaking it down helps you take these like really big problems and shrink them to something that's more digestible.
Yeah, yeah. So I think what I'm getting from you is, on the pattern matching, so that you can say, when you get put into a scenario, it's like, oh, I've seen this movie before. I've heard about this when I've read the case study from XYZ company, or I listened to that podcast, or I talked to Keith. He went through this example. And that's one reason why I run this podcast, is because it's not easy to get an hour, on your calendar, or with some of the guests that I've had. And so I want to hear some of the best lessons that they have, as a way of trying to learn myself, and help other people do that. Um, but then also just studying like first principles thinking and mental models, so that you can take those, and those are just like stem down to the absolute core. And then you can apply those 4 Ps, whether you're selling, working at $100 million SaaS company, or, you're running an HVAC company in Iowa. It wouldn't matter. Those 4 Ps would still apply, and you could just take them to your business.
Yeah, absolutely.
Um, One thing that I heard you mention on one of the podcasts and doing the research was your love of urgency. I think you said, if we were to ask your team one word about you, urgency would be that word. Why is that so important to you?
I think speed matters. And it's something I learned at Google. Like we at Google, we measured the microseconds that the page loaded in, and we measured the speed. And I think it still does this. If you do a search, I think it still tells you how fast it returned the search. And they measured it. I mean, I didn't do this particularly, but like they drilled it into us how much speed matters. Like in user expectations, it matters. In customer expectations, it matters. And so I'm a big believer in that. But I just don't know why, like, there's not really a benefit to waiting on
Yeah.
things that you know need to be done. I grew up as a procrastinator, which is now hilarious for me to think about because now I just like push myself to go get something done. And I'm like, there's no reason for me to wait. Um, yeah, I mean, I think it can be hard too, because sometimes like you can burn people out by being urgent. But again, you create options with urgency also. So by getting something done, you've now shrunk the timeline of when something would be done, which means now you have new options. You can do something else. So you're compressing what you can accomplish so you can do more. And if you can do more and you're focused on the right things, then you can have great outcomes.
Yeah. Yeah. I like to think of it as like there's a compound effect. And, if you, let's say for the listeners, if you're in a sales call or you're running a deal, and the common thing that everyone teaches is you got to land next steps. And I'm talking to Keith, and the common, like the most common, I listen to thousands and thousands of gong calls, and everyone says, "Hey, how about next week, same time? Does that work for you, Keith?" So we're meeting right now on a Friday morning. We then meet. I meet again with Keith the next Friday morning, and we play that out for however long the sales cycle is. But what if Keith had more urgency as a buyer and I wasn't recognizing that? What if Keith wanted to meet later today? What if he was ready on Monday? Right. And now that next call got moved up 4 days. So then everything that's going to happen could get done then. And then we might meet again that next Wednesday, and we might get the contract signed in that case 2 weeks before the other rep that just, kind of like defaulted to a week. And so I think about that you can think about that really with anything that you do. And if you can do it more quickly, that can just stack up. And to your point, you then provide, you get more options for how you might spend your time or new things might come your way. I also think that there's some form of like sales karma out there or life karma where it's like if I'm putting in the work and I'm moving quickly, like new opportunities will come to me that I didn't even see coming. And I just find that when I have urgency and when I'm really moving and shaking, that's when good things kind of fall in my lap and I get, a little luckier.
I think that's true. I mean, I think luck is a big part of life, but you also create your own luck, right? In that scenario where you get my deal in faster because you met with me later today instead of next week, maybe you close the deal. Guess what? Now you've got an extra 4 days you could be prospecting instead of researching my company and figuring out what to do. So that's not luck. Now you've given yourself more opportunities, more shots on goal,
Hmm.
with your prospecting and outbounding. Or maybe you have more time to study on the other prospect who wasn't as clear a winner. Or perhaps you didn't know, but I really was like going to go research a competitor on Tuesday, and you've just pulled this up and now you've taken that option off of my table. So like you're creating your own luck because you're controlling things, right? And how often have you told sales teams or sales leaders you need to control the deal? Well,
Yeah.
urgency puts you in the controller's seat. So
Yeah.
for me, it's just a really big thing you can do. And the only thing holding you back from urgency is yourself.
Yeah.
Um, Again, you do have to worry when you're in a team setting about burning people out and being sensitive to that. But start fast, and it's easier to slow down than to take something with a lot of inertia and speed it up.
How do you, so you manage, there are a lot of people that sit under you. How many people, roughly roll up to you?
It's about 300.
Okay. So obviously you're not directly managing all those folks, but they all have some line to you. They all will come to you from time to time with questions, with asks. So how do you as a leader find the urgency to, maybe that's in the form of like a lot of emails or slacks that you might get across that, with also the urgency that you might need to have for some big rocks that you're trying to accomplish, that are important. How do you balance those two?
I'm a relentless triager,
Mm,
and I triage based on urgency, priority, and severity. And so, some things are small but can be answered quickly. And if I'm the blocker, I don't want to be a blocker because then
Yep.
I'm preventing someone else from being urgent. And so, like, let's say it's a deal approval. We've got an enterprise client. We can get this deal done. It's going to be maybe a slightly larger discount than is normally given. So I have to personally sign off on it. It's going to take me literally 5 seconds to digest this information and give a yes or no. Um, Part of that is prep. Like I stay on top of our deals and forecasts, so I know, and I probably don't have to go watch like the entire gong call. But my job is to get it off my plate so my team can act. I never ever want to be the bottleneck. So there's those kind of things. If it's not urgent, then I'll wait. I'm like a huge fan of just either putting an email into a folder that needs to be acted on later, or like marking the later button in Slack, and then coming back to things that I deem not urgent. If it's not urgent, but it's a high priority, then those bump to the top when I go through that list. And same thing with like high severity items that just could have big consequences. Those are the ones I'm going to take longer to digest. But
Mhm.
otherwise, I'm trying to do like an intrinsic risk value assessment, and low risk things generally I'll try to act pretty fast on.
Yep. Yep. Um, we've talked about urgency. We've talked about optionality. Are there any other key values that you hold as a leader or just common philosophies that you're always either thinking about or sharing with the team that you really harp on?
I would say the other one is tenacity.
Mm,
Um, I love hiring people who don't give up and push through obstacles. Like any job you take, you're going to have obstacles. In sales, you're going to have customers who are difficult. They're going to go dark on you. Tools are changing every day. You gotta learn a new tool a week now. You have to be tenacious, and I think part of that is also adaptability, but it's mostly like the grit to get through these tough times. Or you're in a company. In a company, you've got approvals, and you've got a deal desk, and you've got a rev ops team, and you got to go negotiate with them. And maybe your sales leader doesn't see things the same way you do. But the people who are successful, I have seen time and time again, are the ones who overcome whatever is in front of them. Like they find a way over it, under it, around it. Those people, those are the ones I want on my team. And when
mm,
you pair that with curiosity, which I think is absolutely essential in a seller, you end up with something really special, because not only do you get past the first hurdle, but you start asking yourself questions about what's next. And you're like, I'm not done. So I'm going to keep going because I'm tenacious. And those people just, they continue to uncover value for your organization or for your customers. Um, those are the ones like I want on my team every single time: tenacious, curious, adaptable.
Do you think you can coach for those three attributes, or are those intrinsic that you really need to feel out in the hiring process?
I think you can coach them, but they're hard. They're pretty hard. You
Yeah.
have to have somebody who doesn't have it but wants it.
Mm.
You can't force those on someone, I guess I would say.
Is there an easy way for you to identify in an interview process, like how someone has them? Is it giving them scenarios to answer? Is it like getting real stories from them? Is it, back referencing their bosses? I'm sure it's probably a combination, but I think
Yeah.
most leaders would probably say they want people like that, and not everyone's getting those types of people.
Well, I think a lot of people settle is the honest truth in a hiring
Mm,
process. Like this person is good enough, or I need this person now. I think that is the number one risk in hiring is I've got an open AE head and we're short of capacity. I got to hire this person right now so I can go hit plan. And that's helpful in the short term, but in the long term, you're probably creating a problem where your eventual capacity is capped. So I tend to be more like it's the one place I do act with urgency, but I won't rush a decision because I know I need the absolute best people I can get. Um, I don't have a silver bullet on hiring those people. I wish I did. The closest I've gotten is asking questions and scenarios. The newest one that I really like is, let's say I gave you a project to deliver a week from now. It's something you know nothing about. tell me what you're going to do to deliver this project. It's not perfect because I've gotten like some like kind of like answers that I can't really tell. But
Mm.
how much research are they going to do? Are they going to go talk to customers? Like how deep are they going? How much are they preparing for this project? I haven't quite teased out how to get it yet, but that's one project. I talk about a time, ask about a time they failed. That's a really good one. How do people deal with
Yeah.
failure? These are probably my two best right now.
Yeah. Nice. Cool. Well, I want to segue us into a little bit of a rapid fire so that we can get to know you a little bit better. So we'll give you a softball to kick off with. Um, you talked about learning. We always say on this podcast, we're learning machines, and we love to read and listen to podcasts and stuff like that. So curious if there's any. You strike me as a voracious reader and learner, so I'm curious any books that stand out that it does not have to be a sales book, but really anything that's shaped you, that you gift to people, that you recommend to people, whether it's a seller, leader, or just a friend of yours.
Yeah, I think I've recommended these two before, but I'll say them again. The Heart of Business, which was given to me at Adobe, and I literally laughed
Mm.
when I got it. It's by Hubert Jolet, who is like an ex-consultant and took over Best Buy at a time when everybody thought Amazon was just going to destroy Best Buy, and really actually like bucked the trend and built a really great company that thrived financially. And the premise that I love is the best things in a company happen when you marry the people, the employees, the customers, and the actual purpose of the business, which is not just making money, but like the intrinsic purpose of the
Mhm.
business. And you try to find the intersection of those things. And I try to bring it up all the time, even with, my boss today. Uh, why are we here? What are we doing? How does that tie to the people, the mission, and how we serve our customers? And I believe if you can solve for the intersection of those things, your business is going to be better. And then the second, which my sales leader gave to me, is From Good to Great. And I just, it has a lot of what I intrinsically was trying to lead my team with. Again, like getting the right people on the train, thinking for the long term, and building over time. And one of the things I believe and has been really hard for me, given my sense of urgency, is that sometimes you don't see the change, but the change is happening. And so
Mhm.
then, over 2.5 years at PandaDoc, I can't tell you how many times I'm like, oh my God, we're moving so slow, we're not making progress. But then 2.5 years later, I look and the business has totally changed in a positive direction, not from me, but from like all the stuff that our teams have been doing together. And so I love that book and I love the way they talk about it.
Love it. I have not read I have read Jim Collins. I've not read the first book, so I wrote that one down. I don't know if you are uh, a listener of or watcher of YouTube or listener of podcasts. We won't tell your old boss at YouTube if you don't watch YouTube's, but if you learn in that way or LinkedIn or any other form of learning outside of books, if there's any thing that comes to mind, we'd love to hear that too.
Uh, oh my God, it's also very cliche, but I listen to the All In podcast
Yeah.
and it's kind of like what I was talking about with pattern matching. Like it's, whether you agree with their takes or not, hearing a bunch of clearly smart people arguing and debating about what's happening with the economy or what's happening with these tech companies, I think is really interesting. I have my own takes. Like sometimes I wish I could just like get in there and debate with them. I'm not a poker player either, so I like would never like do one of their poker nights or anything. But I just find those conversations so interesting. Um, and yeah, I want more debates like that in my life.
Yeah. Yeah. That is true. There are very few. I also listen to All In, but there are very few podcasts. I don't know if I can even name another one where there's free debate going on, even if there's multiple hosts. They seem to always have the same opinion on many shows, and so it's like it's very easy to leave that and be like, yeah, I see what their point is, and I could listen to a different podcast with a completely different take and find myself like, oh, I get their point. It's interesting when people kind of are going back and forth, and you really have to like focus in and kind of like look inward and be like, how do I like? I have never really thought about that idea before. Like, how do I feel about that? And what would my thoughts be? So maybe we'll get you on there someday, and you and Chamath can go at it.
Oh my God, it would be hilarious. And it's really interesting because like I think I was there at Google the same time as Freeberg, so it's like very it's just interesting hearing his takes. A lot of what he says I agree with, and then some things I'm like, oh, I don't know. But yeah, I love listening to them. 20 VC is another one. It's a podcast with a prominent venture capitalist, and he gets great guests on. He just had the CPO
Yes.
of Figma on, and I learned a ton listening to their philosophy on product. And then I love The American Optimist with Joe Lonsdale. Like he's clearly just a brilliant, brilliant guy, like founder of Palantir. And I love that it's kind of an optimistic take. Like there's so much in the world we can be pessimistic about, but I love that he's trying to figure out like how we get better and tell the stories of companies and interesting people that are making, you know, the US a better place. Which I think I do tend to try to look at things on the positive side.
Yeah, I love it. What goes on in Keith's headphones, music wise, when you throw on Spotify or whatever else you listen to?
I was so embarrassed to talk about this before, but now it seems like it's gone mainstream. But I'm a country music fan. It's
Oh,
really good.
it could have been way worse than that.
No, but I remember vividly growing up and making fun of country. I grew up like listening to grunge in the 90s and
Yeah.
then alternative. But the first team I ever managed at Google had some country fans on it, and they're like, Keith, you got to come to this concert. And it was a Kenny Chesney concert, and I was like, all right. I love that team. It was the Gmail team, and they took me out to this concert, and then I like started going down the country train. So um, and haven't stopped. And now my daughters listen to country because of me, and it's pretty funny.
And Kenny Chesney, I saw him live last year. He's been hitting it for some time. Not many people put on a show like him. I mean, he must burn 10,000 calories on stage. He's a madman out there.
Yeah, he puts on a good show.
Yeah.
My
Um,
next, I want to see Luke Combs. I missed him when he was out here,
hmm.
and my daughter was like, "Dad, I can't believe we missed that concert." But I think he's super talented, and I love his music.
Yeah, yeah, me too. He's very good. All right. When was the last time that you took a meeting from a cold email, cold call, cold sales approach, um, or really any net new sales meeting, even if it wasn't completely cold? And what was the way they got you, if you can remember it?
Uh, well, I'll tell you the best one while I think of the most
Yeah,
recent.
best one
The
works.
best one was about 3 months into my time at PandaDoc, and I got a cold outreach from a seller at Outreach. She's still the single best, it's still blazed in my mind, the best outreach email I've ever received. Personal, warm, no BS. I mean, it's before any AI, so like it was written by her. It may have been partially scripted, but she did an awesome job. She knew, she did kind of what User Gems does and referenced that I had used Outreach at a previous company, talked about what my priorities as the CRO probably were, had already networked with my team. So she's like, hey, your team doesn't like SalesLoft. Here's what I've heard. And then, dangled some ROI in front of me. Um, and yeah, I took the call. And I've tried to get her on my team for 2.5 years, and she still won't come. Uh,
Someone told me about, I don't know if it was Steph or someone else at PandaDoc had mentioned her, not even by name, but like, we have this outreach rep has been trying to sell us for 2 years. We've been trying to recruit her. So shout
yeah,
out to her.
yeah. I mean, we probably would have switched to Outreach by now, but we just have other things in our tech stack. But yeah, she deserves the sale. She's killer. Um, I think the
And that was
most
an email.
it was just an email, yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
But yeah, she stayed on top of it too. I think we're out of her book now because, well, I know we're out of her book, but I don't get emails from her anymore.
Yeah.
And she's graduated to enterprise, of which we are not. So,
Yeah.
but the most recent one, I think some of it is luck. It's just hitting people at the right time. Um, so I think it was Clay actually wrote us, and I had just at SaaS Stock, I had been talking to a bunch of people, and they were telling me about how they're using Clay. And of course, I had heard about Clay for a long time. but I felt like we were finally ready to start using it. And so they just caught me at the exact right time, unless they have some crazy ABM program that I don't know about and they intuited my intent. But just spot on timing. And yeah, now we're going to be Clay customers, which good job to them.
Nice. Shout out to Clay. While we're on the topic, any other tech, either could be for the team or could just be something that you use personally, knowing that you have to be quite productive and you're always focused on urgency, everything like that. Anything stand out that you've been trying that's maybe like not super mainstream that you like or are testing?
I wouldn't say anything that's not mainstream. I do love Perplexity. I mean, everyone's using ChatGPT, but I love Perplexity. I can like try different models, and the deep research and the user experience is I think the best out there. But I do try
Yep.
to play with the different models all the time. So if you haven't tried Perplexity, I would definitely check it out. The other one is very mainstream, but I went from a total detractor on Gong to a promoter.
Oh
We
man, why were you a detractor, Keith?
Well, I felt like well, first, I don't think they ran a very good sales cycle with us.
Mm,
Yeah, I won't go down that path. But, when I joined PandaDoc, we had Gong and no one was using it. None of our
mm,
managers were using it. Our reps weren't even logging their calls. This is, again, like 2.5 years ago.
yeah,
Um, and we started making them use it so we could coach. But at the time, it was really just that. It was coaching.
yeah,
And then they came out with deal boards, and that was somewhat of a game changer for us. And then Steph, my SVP of sales, was like, we need forecasting. And we did an evaluation. We evaluated Clary and Outreach, and we ultimately went with Gong. And it's just been a game changer. And I think where they have evolved their use of AI, both on the like on a call, across calls, and in the forecast module has been super helpful. I mean, I spend more time in Gong than I do in Salesforce now, and I think most of my sales leaders do.
yeah. Gong should pay me to sponsor this episode. No, it's great. As a former employee there, great tech. Always a believer in it. Love to hear that. I got two more questions for you, Keith. So the last selfish question I have is that at the end of every episode, I ask the guest who they want to see come on this podcast. But the caveat is that they have to help me get them, or at least let me reference their name. So you can't be throwing out some crazy, name out here if we can't put Keith's name on the line.
All right. Uh, oh man, you're stumping me. I have like a name that comes to mind, but yeah, I've got one. He's like the best. Eric Cox, he's the chief customer officer at Dropbox. I don't know if he'll do it. I haven't seen him on a podcast yet, but when I was at Adobe, he was pretty much like my mentor and just like one of the best people. Just like a great stand-up guy, super smart. Nobody outworks Eric. He is just like the hardest worker. Um, and kind of at the time he had my job at Adobe before I had it, so he like had to teach me everything. And then he was running North America sales, and so he would talk to me about it, and he's like, "You're going to run North America sales one day," and like I just like tried to emulate him in a lot of ways. So I think he's got a lot of different takes than me. He's much more of a natural seller, and
Hmm.
but an awesome guy, really smart, doing great things at Dropbox.
Awesome. Well, I will be, Eric, if you're listening to this, you'll be receiving a cold call from me 6 minutes from now. So thank you for that. And then just Keith, last opportunity here. First, I wanted to say thank you for coming on the show, for sharing your journey. A very unique perspective from what we typically get on the pod, which I'm really grateful for, and I learned a lot. I'd love to give you the opportunity. One, I know you're building out your brand quite a bit on LinkedIn, so we want to give you a plug for that. And then anything else, any other last thoughts or any other things that you might want to plug for yourself or for PandaDoc if you're hiring, anything else that comes to mind?
No, I mean, I think PandaDoc's the perfect solution for a lot of probably your listeners, watchers. We are a document agreement management system. designed for sales. And so we help you close the deal. We help you understand who's opened your content. I actually got an email from a seller yesterday with a PDF attachment in it. He has no idea if I opened it, which I did. And I forwarded it to like 6 different people, and he has no idea. With PandaDoc, you would know that got sent around. You would know that it was opened. You would know that I spent 30 minutes looking at different pages on it. So it helps sellers, and it is great for saving leaders time in approvals as well.
Love it. Keith, appreciate you coming on the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. It was fun.
Thanks for checking out that episode. 2 quick things as a takeaway. Number 1, we would feel honored if you left a review wherever you're listening to this podcast, is on Spotify or Apple or YouTube, to just let us know how we're doing, what else you'd like to see. If you'd like to learn more about us, you can check us out at tasales.co. Love to hear from you there. Much love. Have a great week.